to host you at our university, at National University of Architecture and Construction. And it's very important for us, it's very important this meeting, this workshop, because we are putting the first maybe stone for the long-term work, and very important work, because we are going to work on long time on Havutsar Monastery, maybe at the beginning for survey, and after we hope maybe preservation or restoration, we'll see after. But it's important presence of our students and also our guests from different countries and different organizations, very important organizations. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being with us. And just my welcome words, and Gane maybe continue my words about the program.
Thank you very much to everybody for being here and for being interested in being part of this journey that will be a very long journey dedicated to do the Havutsar Monastery in Armenia. And thank you very much to the university, to the National University of Architecture and Construction that wanted to be the leader of the organization of this summer camp. But we are also very happy to have with us other universities in Armenia, other very important universities, the Yerevan State University, represented by Ms. Zuzana Sarunian, and the State Academy of Fine Arts. This is very important because there is a process of reconstruction of the structure for education in the field of preservation. Preservation is a very complex practice that should involve different disciplines and different aspects. So it is very important to have this collaboration between different institutions that are everyone considering one part of the whole process. It is also very important to have multidisciplinary and to have a connection between local and international expertise. And we are very honored to have here very important guests from the World Monument Fund, from Europa Nostra, and from Heritage for Peace that are joining us for the whole day. And this is indeed very important and very unique occasion also for you to be part of this and to have the possibility to speak with such important personalities. So Havutsar is a very, very interesting place, and is inside a natural reserve area, so the landscape all around is untouched. And so we are working on Havutsar because of the decision of a person who was born in a Gocht village, which is very near to the monastery. And since his childhood, he was looking at this wonderful monument. I was thinking, what can I do to make it able to be transferred to future generations? Because for me, having this site was so important. I want that this would become permanent also for the next generation. He's a person who is working in the field of AI, so he's very conscious that in few years, our knowledge would be transmitted to us through these instruments. And so there is also the risk to lose the connection with what is there physically. And so it is very important to understand all of this, to understand how history arrived to us through these monuments, through the achievement of our ancestors. So now our guest will explain you better about these themes, but the workshop, this week workshop, is dedicated to understand which should be the approach before, because sometimes people think that you arrive there, you design a project of restoration, then you restore it and that's it. But this is not the case. This is a very complex process, and so we simply will understand the complexity. It's not certain that we can find solutions. We will understand the complexity, and this is already a lot. So we can start with inviting Professor Partzinger, who is the president of Europa Nostra, but he is also an archaeologist, so has a lot of experience in this. So I would ask him before to explain to us what is Europa Nostra, because maybe not all of you know this important organization, but then I would have some question also concerning archaeology. So let's start with Europa Nostra.
Okay, good morning from my side, and thank you again for inviting us here to talk to you. This is very important. I'm really impressed to see so many young people, so the youth, the young generations, so heavily engaged in heritage and the preservation of heritage. There's something very important. And this leads me immediately to Europa Nostra. Europa Nostra is the largest civil society network in Europe. We have thousands of members, associate member organization, associate organizations, but individual members. And more than half of the individual members are young professionals. So this is very important for us. Of course, we are now trying to integrate the young generation more and more in the governing bodies. We have a council, we have a board, but I think this is very important, this engagement for Europa Nostra. Europa Nostra was founded in Paris in 1963, so we have 62 years now. And of course, the most important task which we had was already almost 25 years. We are organizing for the European Commission the Heritage Awards, the European Heritage Awards, Europa Nostra Awards. These are about 30 awards each year in in 5 categories. This is conservation, adaptive reuse, up to heritage professionals, networking, and so on. In all fields, even research, on all fields which are important for heritage and heritage preservation. And then from the 30, there will be 5 Grand Prix. And there's always a ceremony, award ceremony, and this is very important because the Commission of the European Union comes, and I think we have a very strong standing in the meantime in the European Commission in the field of heritage as a civil society organization. And of course we are not only restricted to the EU member states, so we have a lot of members in Ukraine, in Armenia, in Georgia, in Serbia, in Montenegro and so on. And we are even expanding a little bit more to these non-member states because so many organizations, so many NGOs engaged in heritage, so it's important to support them, to connect them with us. So Europa Nostra is not an organization which has money to spend, so we are just a network, a platform. And of course we got some money from the European Commission for the awards, for several projects which we are doing always in connection with others. Not Europa Nostra alone, but with others, the European Heritage Alliance and many other organizations. And what is important for us, and this really brought us to a new level of engagement, is the European Cultural Heritage Hub. This was in concurrence from the European Union. They wanted to establish such a heritage hub, working as a platform, a network, advocacy, bringing people together, networking heritage organizations for Europe in 3 fields. In 3 fields which are important for transformation in Europe: societal transformation, digital transformation, and climate change, which is heavily connected, of course, also to heritage. And we had now the pilot phase, ends at the end of this month, so no, it ended at the end of June. Now we are waiting to be invited to apply for the next phase, but I think we have very good cards, very good chances to continue in this and to really make it sustainable. And this is very important. And in connection with, this is also important to explain Europa Nostra, we have country organizations. So there's the Europa Nostra itself. We have the main offices in The Hague. There it was always. Now we have a growing, ever more and more growing office in Brussels, because the connection with the EU Parliament, the Commission and so on is more and more important. But it's an overall organization. Then we have country representations. We have Europa Nostra United Kingdom, Europa Nostra Belgium, Europa Nostra Italy, Hispania Nostra, and so on. But they are more or less working independently, but of course connected somehow with Europa Nostra, the overall organization. And then in the last years, through this European Cultural Heritage Hub, we are organizing hubs, regional hubs. We had one in Krakow, then Nicosia, Lisbon, and maybe in Yerevan there's one. We are talking about Potsdam one day. They are dedicating to regional topics. In Krakow, for example, organizing the help to Ukraine, because it's a neighboring country. But then in Potsdam we are thinking about one, because there's an institute, very famous, world famous institute for research on climate change and the impact of climate change. Maybe this regional hub could focus on this. So maybe in Yerevan it could be on regional, of course, in South Caucasus, but also culture in crisis, which is an important topic here. So this is what we are developing. And of course, we are developing, and we're not a great team, I must say. We have the staff in The Hague and Brussels are as young as you are almost, but very much engaged. And we are only 15 people altogether. My position, I'm doing this honorarily, and many others as well. We have quite a lot of vice presidents from different countries, a board. Everybody is doing this honorarily. But the staff, of course, which is working in the offices, is paid. So we are trying to expand, and especially for all what is happening in your country, in a country like yours, we're trying really to connect us with yourselves and with you, and really trying to support wherever we can. So this in short word what is Europa Nostra.
Thank you very much, and I would add that for the young, membership to Europa Nostra is free, so I invite all of you to register and to be member of this interesting organization, because there's a lot on for the youngsters. So Europa Nostra is connecting the young people with different organizations. There are programs for the young ambassadors, so you can be really involved and you can find occasions to learn a lot. I personally learned a lot from Europa Nostra, so I advise all of you to be in touch.
One point I forgot, this, of course I only can underline this, and we are, in earlier times we had the award ceremony, which is always once a year. It's an important European capital, and now in the meantime, since 2018, this was the year of cultural heritage, the European Year of Cultural Heritage, and since then, in 2018, we started for the first time not only to make an award with nice speeches and some champagne after, but really to connect it with something more, with contents. So we organized, since then, we have each year a European Cultural Heritage Summit. So there is the fair, the Excellence Fair, where all the award winners are presenting their topics. Then there is the award ceremony, there's the General Assembly, there's a board meeting, and then we have one day, or at least half a day, a topic with a panel, we call it Heritage Agora, with panel discussions. There are mostly the commissioners coming. Then we have members of the European Parliament, of the regional parliaments, depending on the country where we are, and of course stakeholders from the heritage field. I think this is very important, that not only to have nice ceremonies, but also to work and to make clear what is connecting us, what are the challenges. And from each summit we have a paper. There's the Venice Manifesto, it was 2 years ago. It was the 60 years of Europa Nostra. We had a paper on the applying for a European cultural citizenship in a way, and always topic like this. In the last year in Bucharest, it was the digital transformation, what that means in the heritage field. So there's always a topic. And the next one, middle of October, is in Brussels. And therefore, I underlined engage on Europa Nostra, because you also can participate online. This is important. We understand that not everybody can travel to these cities, but you can participate. This is very important. So you are very heartily invited to take part.
You mentioned the award. Armenia up to now obtained 8 awards, so Armenian projects are also considered. One of those awards was given to the group of Patrick Donabedian for the research on Ereruic, and it was archaeological research, and it is a research that lasted for 7 years and still is not considered final. So this brings us to a reflection on what is archaeological excavation, what is giving to us, and why it takes so long, and which should be the approach. So we are now going in a place where archaeological excavation will be needed. So what should we think, what should we do for planning a good archaeological excavation? And maybe, as the audience here is not from archaeologists, so maybe a few words on what archaeology is.
Well, I'm an archaeologist, prehistorian to be precise, and excavating for more than 40 years. I worked almost 30 years in former Soviet Union, so in Russia, in Siberia. After the fall of the Iron Curtain, I worked almost 30 years in Siberia, excavating in Tuva, in other parts of Siberia, in Kazakhstan, in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, not in the Caucasus. Many times I've been in Georgia. This is the first time in Armenia, in Ukraine, but working more to the East Central Asia and east of this part. Well, archaeology, I mean, there are two kinds of excavations. One is rescue excavations, so in all of the countries, when there are building activities and you find something in the soil, you have to document it at least. It can be destroyed, and excavation, even research excavation, is always a destruction. So, as it is in its destruction, you have to precisely document everything. And of course, there's a progress. 100 years ago, the archaeologists always thought they would decently document what they find, and now when you're looking back, well, they lost a lot. So of course there's a progress in the quality of documentation. The documentation is crucial. It's crucial because also in the analysis of excavations, many times later you understand really what you found. But this is rescue excavation, and then there are research excavations. But what for me always was so fascinating in the field of archaeology, and why at the end I decided to become an archaeologist, is there are two things. One thing is that in archaeology there are so many fields or epochs and corners in the world where we are still do not know much about the cultural development. One point. The second point is an excavation, it must not be great sensational discoveries, but can change our picture of a certain site, of a certain region, a certain period completely. This in history also happens, but not so often than in archaeology. When I stand it, I said, well, I want to become archaeologist. And the other point is that archaeology by itself, archaeology in the meantime became more and more interdisciplinary. So some people say even that archaeology is the field or the discipline in humanities most influenced by natural sciences, because you cannot really understand the past, because we are reconstructing the past, but we have only the rubbish from the past. We do not have manuscripts or things like that, like historians. We only have the rubbish which we found. And if you have a cemetery, it's different, because in a cemetery, what people put into a grave was selected. That was maybe something, sometimes it was looted, but normally if it was not looted, we have a selection. This is, of course, very important for social status, for the belief of after what comes after death, and so on and so on. But settlement, or as you mentioned, excavating in a monastery and so on, this is different. So you will find a lot of rubbish, but this can give enormous information about nature, about economy of the societies living there. And this is so important. And even in the last years, there's an enormous development on paleogenetics. So what can we say about migrations? And I mean, cultures, when you look back to the past, there are more migrations than homogeneous cultures. I mean, we are discussing in Europe about migrations. I mean, especially in Germany. Germany wouldn't be as it is now without all these migrations through Central Europe, north, south, west, east, which happened all our history. And I mean, but this is with poor archaeological means. 100 years ago, they found a certain type of axe in the east, and a little bit younger, same type in the west as well. People migrated. It's not that easy. It's not that easy, because there are many explanations why an object became or is found in another part later. But paleogenetics can really help in understanding population development. So, and these are many things. And of course, when you're doing restoration work, and the most famous archaeologists have been architects in the late 19th century. So of course they found ruins, standing ruins, but of course they had to understand them and the development which was before. You have to dig, you have to look to see what was below, and of course also the development. When you're going, and I'm curious to see this site today, all this, and we have been in Geckhardt. I mean, there must have been something before the 12th, 13th century. This is a spring, there must have been spring sanctuary, maybe even dating back to prehistory. But of course, as it's cut into the rock, and then heavy constructions in the 12th, especially 13th century, I suppose most of the older remains disappeared. But I know how it is the situation, but really, I think it's very important to find, not only to understand what you see, the ruins, to restore them and so on, but also the history of the site, how it became into being, what you see today. I think this long story this deep story is so important as well. And this is the contribution of the archaeologists. The architects can dedicate to the structures which are visible, and we are looking to the non-visible, but I think for a whole understanding of a site, this is very important, maybe so far.
Yeah, and you mentioned also the rubbish, also the earth. I mean, the archaeologists studied the layers and how they were one on the other, and we can have information from there, no? which is...
Stratigraphy is very important. Stratigraphy is not that easy. You have to make sections, you have to clean the profiles well, and there's also one point I said before, that many things you understand after when you work on the documentation, on the material. This is true, but on the other side, when you have a profile, the different colors of the earth, to understand how the layers have been formed and so on, do not lose the moment in the field, because this you only can take an interpretation in the field when you're looking at the profile. So, because the documentation then is already the first step of an interpretation. And so this is therefore so important really to understand how the earth, or the layers are going together, are being combined with the different layers of constructions and so on, and fundaments of older buildings under the real buildings which are still standing there. I think this is not very easy, it's complicated. It needs a certain experience, therefore archaeologists should excavate, even the young ones should, as early as you can, start with participation in excavations, really to develop your eye, your experience, your feeling, what you are seeing.
Yeah,
and this is the nice thing, except all the science, you need still feeling.
Yeah, this is very important. And I asked because my first experience as an architect, I was invited by an archaeologist. He called me, he told me, we found a prehistoric house, there's everything there, is wonderful. So I came there with a lot of expectation. Then when I arrived, I see simply nothing. And I said, oh my God, what I can do? And then they started to explain, and I discovered a word that they've seen in so tiny layers of earth of different colors and different pieces, and it was really very important. And well, thank you very much. This was very inspiring, and this leads also to another consideration that monuments are very much attached to the people that, as you mentioned, the people that used to live there. So it is important also to study and understand these human aspects. So this is why we have the honor and the pleasure to have here an anthropologist from the Yerevan State University, Ms. Rosanna Tsarunian. So if you can, I mean, we will have lessons on that, so if we can shortly explain why it is important to have anthropology in the topics of this summer camp.
Thank you for having me in this beautiful and very important interdisciplinary summer camp. I'm happy also to see so many young people interested in interdisciplinary approaches to what we call preservation of monument or reconstruction. I'm anthropologist. Usually in Armenia we do call it ethnographer. Cultural anthropologist or ethnographer. We are mostly dealing with thinking about how people think and how they see their spaces, how they perceive what's surrounding them, and usually we are caring about people perception. And even when we are thinking about systems, about institutions, about spaces, about settlements, we do prefer to think from the lens of human beings, from the lens of people, and this is I think the most human-centered subject in all the social sciences, and I love it. This is the work of my life. And I hope I will share that passion also with you during our classes to see why people at first create their sacred places, what meaning do they bring or attach to those places, and how it is important to have that anthropological vision, even if you are future architects or archaeologists. I'm looking forward for working together.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. This is very important. And we also the pleasure to have here somebody who is on the what people want to communicate to us through the monument. So epigraphy is also a very important topic, and so we have here Arsena Rutunian from the Yemen State University also that can tell us a few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. This nice opportunity. Really, that is very, very important for our student. I'm an epigraphist. I'm from Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography, head of the Department of Epigraphy. Of course, I have lectures at Yerevan State University and the same University of Construction of Armenia. Why epigraphy very important? Because epigraphy, epigraphic inscriptions, are part of the history of each monument. Today we have opportunity to see and study the all historical and epigraphic material of Agustar Monastery, because Agustar one of very, very important and very famous monastic complex of Armenia. And of course, the part of the history of Agustar are epigraphic sources. I am sure today we have a chance to study some epigraphic sources in the place, and I'm sure it will be very, very interesting for our students and our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we are looking forward to that. And we have here the honor to have Yannis Avramides, who is the Senior Program Director of the War Monument Fund. So first of all, please, can you present a bit the War Monument Fund to our students?
Of course. Thank you. Good morning, students. Thank you, Diana. Pleasure to be here, and as you can tell, there is so much interest in what we are doing. I wasn't expecting to see so many cameras and press people, but I think that just means that there's a lot of excitement in this field school. So let me first tell you quickly about the organization that I work for. It's called World Monuments Fund. It's a private organization, and we say that we are the leading private organization that is dedicated to saving the world's most treasured places. We are headquartered in New York, but we have activities and offices worldwide. At the moment, we have about between 40 and 50, a little over 40 active projects in 30 some countries. And we work primarily on conservation field projects alongside other activities that touch on education, advocacy, research, but the bulk of what we do is conservation field projects at sites that a lot of them look a lot like what I haven't been to Agustar yet, but I imagine that the site looks like when we visit it later today. We work always collaboratively and in partnership with local communities, local agencies, local stakeholders. We don't, in all of our field projects, we design them together with our partners. We don't try to impose our own solutions. We work collaboratively, and we focus very much on building local capacities. We do not have an active project in Armenia, although that might change in the future. But for now, it's my second opportunity to visit the country. I was here in the fall and starting to understand more about the monuments, the sites, the needs, the opportunities, the capacities. And so I'm very excited to be with you this morning and also to visit the site and walk around it and see what we can learn from it later today.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we are also looking for your third time here in Armenia, and the fourth and fifth and so on, because indeed World Monument Fund is an incredible organization, so to have keep working here would be great. So this comes as you have an impressive record of projects. So the question is, what are you doing? Somebody is proposing a project, a site, and when you go there, which are the thoughts that you have? How do you plan the next steps and you organize the approach?
Yes, this is a very important, useful topic, question, and as you said in your introduction, preservation is a complex process, it's not straightforward. So I have prepared some things that I can share with the students. How long do you think this can go for, Diana? How much time do you have?
Your speech?
Yeah, to talk.
As you want, we have 1 hour and
1 hour.
Bologna, you can ask me 1 hour. But, I mean,
Well, I will try to.
Take your time.
I will try to keep it short to only 1 hour.
Now let's say up to 1 hour.
Sure. I don't think I will even need half an hour. I haven't prepared any images. I just wrote down some thoughts on this general question that Diana posed to me, and that she thought would be interesting, important to talk about on the first day of the field school, which is when one of us, you're a heritage professional, you're an architect, and you maybe get hired or get a phone call and you're asked to visit a site like Hungry Star and make a preliminary assessment, investigation, and how would you approach that? What are important things to keep in mind, and how would you go about designing your next steps? So again, I haven't visited the site, but I just try to read a little bit about it in general sources. So when you go there this afternoon, my general understanding is that it's a complex of structures, right? I think it's primarily dating from 12th, 13th, 14th centuries, right? But then I also learned that there's maybe even older structures there. So we're going to see, walls, building structures that are 800 years old. But then we will probably also see repairs. There was probably earthquakes. I thought there was at least one big earthquake in the 17th century, and then maybe the site was rebuilt again. And there may probably even be repairs from the 20th century. I don't know the history. That's probably something that exists somewhere in archives. People can find it. Maybe you've done this research already. But the point is, we go there, we see things from different periods. We don't, really know what they are, and then immediately the question in our field, where for so many people the idea behind what we're trying to do is we're managing, we're preserving, we're trying to work with the quality of authenticity, right? So what parts are authentic, which parts should be kind of preserved as they are, which parts are worth an intervention to prevent further loss. Again, I've seen pictures. I imagine there's vegetation, so how do we remove the vegetation, or what's the order of operations? So all those questions. So I wrote down some notes on loose framework, loose kind of approach. I don't think there is a single approach that people take, but it's important to kind of have all the different things in mind that you might consider. And so the first kind of general breakdown or division is between different levels, different scales, different levels of scale and geography. So the first one is, for a site especially like the one we're visiting, look at the landscape, right? So the geography of the site, why, we'll start to tell you why was the site here, what made people decide to select this location. I think we'll see the site, there's a gorge, there's a river, so already that starts to mean some things about why the location was chosen, for security, for maybe it's a monastery, right, for spiritual reasons, with the landscape. Probably access to water was important. So again, start to understand these things, tells you why the site was significant, but also what might be threatening it today from environmental forces, its exposure, its relationship to the river. I don't think there's flooding, but maybe there is. I don't know. There is?
Yeah, it's not very near, but there is a gorge and then there is.
Yeah, so all these questions, how does the site relate? What features of the landscape influenced the people who built it? And also environmental change, and how has the environment changed since the 12th century maybe, but also as obviously we are in a time when environmental change is happening more quickly, something else to, of course, also keep in mind. Then at the site level, this is a little more architectural, I guess, but this is a complex monastery, so how do the components work together? How did the buildings and the structures work together? There's walls, probably. There's monastery. There's a church. There's guest rooms. Probably a water infrastructure of wells or cisterns, or I don't know. These probably all need to be mapped. But even before you map them formally, to sort of start to understand the relationship between the structures, how the one thing work with the other, different building phases, of course, in our field. Sometimes you work on a historic building from recent history, there's a single construction date, but in a site like this, different layers, different phases, different periods. And then, circulation, access, defensive functions, all the things like that. And then one layer down, sorry, some water, about maybe details, right? So what materials are found at the site, what techniques that were used to put them together, what evidence do we see, and can we identify what looks like a repair, what looks like an alteration, what helps us understand the history better. Of course, inscriptions, which we just heard about, super important. I wonder if there's something behind me, but I think not. Patterns, patterns of wear, patterns of deterioration, like which side of the complex might be more exposed, things like that. And so all of this, the point of all of this, or one of the end goals of all of this is to, before we start thinking about the current needs of the site, important to reconstruct the history of the place, and learning to read it and understand it. And maybe this has been done already before you. Maybe there's a report somewhere in archives in the library. Maybe it's I don't know. But that there's also a phase of maybe library work and library archival research that we haven't done. All these things, and of course how they connect to possible historical events. I mentioned an earthquake, but maybe also other episodes in history of crises, invasions, conflict, things like that. So that's one kind of framework, is different levels at which to look at the site. The other kind of framework that I thought might be useful to impose comes a little bit from kind of three different concepts that we rely on at World Monuments Fund, not at the investigation phase, but really more when a site is proposed to us, when a site is nominated, especially to our World Monuments Watch program, which we run on a 2-year basis. We accept nominations, and then what we say in our guidelines and our materials is that the criteria for selection to the watch are significance of the site, urgency of the challenges, timeliness of the challenges, and viability or feasibility of the proposed approach. And so that's, another scheme, but I thought also possibly useful to keep in mind when visiting a site like Havre Star. So when it comes to first, when it comes to significance, which in a sense is the basis for our assessments of value and for what matters, for what to preserve. You know, there's a theory behind, of course, values and assessment of significance, but just briefly, and especially in this case, we might look at kind of architectural significance, especially that's if you're trained as an architect, and I think the majority of people in this room are, and maybe me also, my first degree was in civil engineering and architecture. Maybe we're more predisposed to think primarily in terms of architectural value, aesthetic value, what it says for architectural development, maybe of Armenian architecture through time. But yes, one very important category of value, but then also other types of value. So just basic historical significance, again, or connections to important events, important people. I don't know who built the site, who lived there, who might have occupied it later in history. So interesting questions. Then a broad term, I guess, is cultural significance, which for me is a very broad term that can encompass all the things that we're talking about. But even if you think about it a little more narrowly, what does it mean for communities today? What are the connections to, I don't know what the closest settlement is, but there are, I'm sure, people living close to the site. So what does it mean for them? Should probably interview people and ask them that. That would be useful. Then kind of course, we talked about archaeology, so kind of scientific understanding, what could the site teach us? Like Professor Parsinger was saying about a different site, Lagarde, you know, there might be, the site might be important because it contains, even though we cannot see it, but it might contain evidence of occupation at very early times, so that's another reason for preserving it today. And then, of course, this is, I think it's still a sacred site, correct? So spiritual, religious significance as a church. So those are things that you might want to consider in order to establish a significance of the site. And then if you follow this process, I don't think this can be done in one day or in 1 week. But if you build an understanding of significance, then ultimately to really make a plan for the site, you would really want to kind of understand and map out which components of the site represent kind of different aspects of the significance of the site, because that's going to be your guide to what to protect and how to protect it. But that was significance. I told you then also we have our second big criterion for watch nominations, which is urgency. So that really has to do with the conditions of the site and what what we see are urgent threats. I suppose that's not a bad word to use, and what will be lost potentially if we don't act. And there are different orders, I guess, of significance, but very often we talk about things that are emergencies, kind of highest priorities, and there it would be very useful, even on even in a short engagement, to really identify those, because even if this particular field school doesn't result in in a big program of intervention at the site, but as a professional, it's important to point out urgent and kind of important priorities. So very basic physical things like structural urgency, structural instabilities. Are there things that are about to fall down? Are there specific locations that are important to protect urgently? Sure, reinforce. As I mentioned, understanding environmental threats, very important, but also human threats. The site is, I don't know, is it protected? Is there a fence? How do people access it? Is there vandalism? Is there looting? Maybe, I don't know. But also from potential human activities that take place, farming, agriculture, things like that. The speed at which things are deteriorating is another important concern. So is something happening very slowly and gradually, or is there, or is deterioration more rapid, or is there a risk from a very acute event? So that obviously earthquakes, but let's say a big storm might happen tomorrow and might take away part of the site. So all those types of questions. And then our last big concept is about feasibility. So what action could be taken to address some of the threats and preserve the significance. And there you would look at things like access, how do people access the site if we were to have a big project. I remember one of the sites that I visited in the fall, which just to get building materials, restoration materials to the site means you have to walk, I don't know, 20 minutes through muddy soil, and I don't know, I have examples from World Monuments Fund's work in Peru, in protected natural areas where it's multiple days to get to the site, and we need to switch from a train to a bus to a mule to a hike, and so the practical questions about feasibility, questions about capacity. So let's say we need to do a big masonry program with masonry repairs. So where are the skills coming from? Are there skilled craftspeople who know how to do this, or have some of these skills been lost? Maybe not so much in the case of Halbertstar, but things about regulations, permits, how do we work with authorities, and community support. Is the community behind it, against it, for it? What do they want to see? And money, which is something that we often think is something that we can provide. We don't have money, but we are good at raising money. So we, in all of our engagements, even though we work collaboratively, often there's a big need for funding, for resources, and that is something that usually comes from World Monuments Fund. And just to fully illustrate that, so that people know what I'm talking about, we have a broad base of funders, but they include individuals primarily, but also corporations, foundations, and maybe sometimes even government programs, which is not as common in America, but it's a lot more common in Europe to have these EU funding or government funding. Okay, so this was the other kind of framework that you might use. Someone said, Kayane said, spoke about people. I think it's important to keep that in mind. One of my mentors, I guess, has this line that I really believe in that says, preservation begins and ends with people. So I think that's, again, especially if you're primarily looking at kind of structures and stones and walls because you're an architect and you like those things, but to not lose track of the community angle. So who cares about the site? Why do they care about it? And you'd see, you'd think about, again, local stakeholders, local people, local communities, religiously affiliated people who consider the site sacred. There you can also talk, I guess, about maybe this is a separate topic, but if so long as we're talking about different interests at the site, I think it's no secret, no surprise that a lot of the sites are at the same time tourism assets, or people often see them as tourism assets. So it's a whole separate discussion about tourism, I guess, tourism development, tourism analysis. But if, I don't know, maybe someone will have the time and the interest during the course of the week to think more about the potential of the site to attract visitors and how that might be approached for visitor management, for facilities, for what people need, how the site could be promoted, how the site could be combined with other visits. This is more of an aside. But when it comes to people, of course, listening is very important. We often engage people, but more because we want to tell them what we're doing, or to tell them as experts what is important about the site. But I think you also learn a lot. It's important to allow people's priorities to emerge from the bottom up, and that helps, of course, build trust at what we're doing, which is also a very important dimension, because one day you will show up at a site and people will not know who you are, and they start wondering why you're there and what the point of all this, of all this examination is. So building trust, understanding decision-making power, of course. I think this is a publicly owned site. Is that correct? Yes. So it's the government. And then all of this, and I don't know how far you might get, but the point of all of this assessment and understanding and investigation is eventually to lead to planning. And again, for planning, you might think between sort of immediate versus long-term, but Also because things take time and funding takes time, but all of these projects, of course, very useful to lay them out in phases and priorities in order to be able to approach them. And so again, between emergency things that might be needed, temporary supports, or building a shelter or whatever to protect a particular feature or to secure the site. I came from, recently I was at a field project in Antakya in Turkey, where there was a huge destruction following the earthquakes in 2023, and even now, 2 years later, because the historic center of the city is very, still destroyed, and not very many people live there, so there's huge problems with looting, people rummaging around, people constantly trying to access our site. I don't know what they're looking for because it's just fallen stones, but site security in that case is super important. And then from that to longer term things, of course, even thinking about training programs that might be needed, site management, planning, a whole other topic, which I know is taking place for some sites in Armenia, specifically the World Heritage sites, but it doesn't mean that it's a process, it's a method that can be applied at any level, at any scale of site, and at any level of significance. So that's something else that you might talk about. What did I miss? Documentation, of course. Documentation is super important. Documenting existing conditions, and drawings are often very useful. I don't want to keep on for too long. Yes, I think this probably gives you.
So there's a lot running all around of this discourse. And so I'm very happy to introduce you to this group of professors from the University of Bologna. So they will have a lot of time to explain to you everything during those days. So now they simply, I think, introduce a bit their topics. And we have Alessia Zampini, Leila Signorelli, Maurizio Villata, and Valentina Suni from the University of Bologna.
Hi, so everybody, we are so happy to be here. Thank you always to Gaia and Casati for the organization of this workshop, this summer school, sorry. I think that from the point of view of the architect, we have nothing more to add to what Gaia and Casati said in Yannis said today, so maybe we will add just shortly from our perspective that we want to share our approach to the cultural heritage. So the method, let's say, that we want to share with you and hopefully to leave to you, which is a method which is formed and based from our Western perception of cultural heritage and how we should include in our reasoning toward the project or the transformation, the stratification, the layers, so how we come to build and construct our view, which is the view that shapes the project that we have in mind. So we hope to transfer this method, which is a method that we think is useful when we are facing an archaeological site, so a very ancient, let's say, kind of cultural heritage, but also when we approach to more recent ones. So it is like some passages which are mandatory, let's say, to understand and to figure out what's your thought around that asset is. The other thing that we bring here, let's say, is our enthusiasm to work with students, because we work at the university, so we are used to work with students, but we really enjoy summer schools, workshops, so this time where you have very few days in order to achieve a result. And so this very intensive way of working with you, very side by side, is always so satisfying for us. And we think that in this time it's enjoyable for students, for professors too, because we really share and we learn from each other. And so this is a great occasion for us to approach a heritage which is here in Armenia, and to understand better what's the perception of the student here in Armenia toward heritage, and how we can include that in order to widen our view also, and to enrich the work that we are doing. Maybe I leave the floor to my colleagues. I don't know if you want to say something or add something.
Just to say hello to everyone, and I'm very honored and happy to meet you all. We will tutor you and we will be with you for the whole week till Saturday. So we will have the chance to discuss. We are really interested to see what is your perspective. What we will ask you to do will be to, of course it's very difficult, as everyone said before us, to do a real, complete and extensive project of conservation of a site in 1 week. But what we really would like you to do, and together of course, is to keep together all these knowledges that you have heard here and understand how important are all these contributions for the architect perspective, because from archaeologists we learn about the knowledge and this understanding of certification, so we will learn how it is important to keep an eye on all this certification and understanding those certifications. Let us know, for example, what was the story. It make the buildings that we read as a document. So it will be very important, not only the layers of the earth, but also the layers of the architecture. So the facade, if we are very skilled and trained, can really be helpful to us to understand the history of the place, and understanding how to keep those layers will be crucial. Also the epigraphy will tell us something about the story, can help us in dating some specific part of the building, understanding if moving from stones from one side to another was done in the past, and this will be back to the idea of exchange. And also we would like you to think not only to the material part, but also to the spiritual elements, to some immaterial and intangible values that you will be able to get from the site. Soundscape, how the sound, how the smells, how the colors of your earth, of these sites can be related and can be valuable for a conservation project. And of course, what is the aim of our, let's say, of our possible project? What is the vision that we have? That's what we would like to develop with you. So a sort of a vision of a project, understanding the values that we can recognize. We as external, the people that are living there, possible people interested in visiting the site, what does this heritage means for the local communities that are living there. So we will try to guide you through this, let's say, process, at least at the beginning. And of course, even understanding what is your perspective, because what we would like also to avoid is just like the international community are coming to tell you what you have to do. This is not exactly how it goes. It's more understanding what is our approach, what is our contribution, and what is your perspective. So what you can, let's say, tell us from the site that are the very important things that we need to take care when doing this kind of exchange. Never thinks that we are like coming here and like, of course we are teacher, we need to help you in doing some training, but your perspective is really important. So that's how your voice counts in this kind of project, and this is how it can be really helpful in 1 week, I guess.
Thank you very much. This is very important, and this brings to us so the relationship between the persons and the monument, and also when people is not anymore living in the monument, is not anymore using it, is detached, and so this brings us to invite Mr. Isbert Sabri, who has extensive experience in working in regions where people maybe also in a very brutal way detached from the monuments, and he is facing for destroyed monuments, and so it's interesting also to see his experience. He's working for an organization who is named Heritage for Peace, because indeed this is a very important point.
Thank you, Kaine. Hi everyone, it's my pleasure to be here with you, and actually it's just looking and listening to what the other said. I just want to say that, I mean, really you have a very important task for Armenia. I myself, coming from Syria, being a student and left Syria, went to Spain, and something which I think very important for you as students, and this is from shared experience, that when you talk about architects and reservations, rehabilitation, conservation, something important we need to consider is management as well. So a lot of architects and you as well have a possibility to learn about management of cultural heritage, management of monuments, and this is something I noticed from my visit to several sites in Armenia, how really impressive sites are and how really the needs of management. So my advice and that really, I mean, you consider this as well for your future career, that you need to learn about the management of the sites, you know. Armenia is a small country, but it's a very rich country with its heritage. And all of these monuments, if they will be managed in a good and proper way, the cultural heritage in Armenia could be really contributing to the economy in a very important way. So, and actually this is what also we were trying to do when I was at your age and I started to study management of cultural heritage. Unfortunately, the war happened, and then we decided to try to protect the heritage. So what I think really, and now I think the university play an important role, and I hope we can also support you as well. You know, I am and with our colleagues in Italy and in academic centers, Spanish National Research Council and University of Bologna, what come to my mind now to create an Erasmus project, which is very easy, not complicated.
We have a few here already, and it's very important too, yes, of course.
With the University of State here, and we can really make really like scholarships for you to come and to learn and to stay. We need to really be practical. And I think this is something we really need to discuss. And so, on the other hand, I think also I am also attached to the Armenian heritage because I am Syrian, and in Syria we have a lot of Armenian people, and always we grow up with the Armenian. To somehow is part of our identity as a Syrian. You know, in Aleppo or in other places in Syria we have churches, we have manuscripts, we have Armenian food. So, so this is also another motivation for me to be in Armenia and to work as well for the future. Also, what is interesting, and I think this is some of you, some of you are also originally from Karabakh, and I think there is a need to think about how you also support the protection of cultural heritage, and which is threatened by the conflict in now. And there is really a lot of work to do on this. You know, at least we need, and this is also a duty for all the Armenian, to work on the documentation and make a database of Armenian heritage in around, also not just in Armenia, because also in Syria we have many Armenian heritage was destroyed. And I wish in the future some Armenian come to Syria and also collaborate with Syrian students, because we still really have a lot of things to be done, and you have really a huge duty for your future, you know, so don't think that architecture just is about the construction, it's also about, you know, preserving the identity of Armenian people.
Thank you very much, and indeed you touched a very important topic. We are I've been contacted not only by Armenians from Syria, but also from Iraq and from Iran, because in different places, for different regions, Armenians are starting to be detached from their heritage, and it is very important to find ways to preserve this heritage, and also from Cyprus, and to understand which can be the use once the population that use those buildings and the population that were attached to the values connected with this building as different values, but there is still the artistic value and there's still the architectonic value that should be preserved. Well, we are coming to a close. We are here also the honor to have the architect that already worked on this site, Mr. Amiran Badishan, who works for the Ministry of Culture of Armenia, and we are very happy that he decided to join this workshop and will be with us for a few days. So today, when we'll be on the site, he will explain much more to us, but now I will give you the floor to him for a short introduction.
Ողջունում եմ բոլորին։ վերականգնող ճարտարապետ Ամիրան Բադիշյան, մասա երևի թարգմանում։ Հաղորդարի վանքը իմ համար ունի առանձնահատուկ նշանակություն և դեր։
The monastery of Avotstara has indeed a very important significance and a place for me.
Իմ սերունդի երիտասարդ տարիների ժամանակ Ավոտստարը եղել է մեր արշավային ամենահիմնական ուղղությունը, քանզի ինքը ունի բազմաթիվ գաղտնիքներ, այդ առումով մեզ միշտ ձգել է իր տարածքը։
So when we were young, Avotstara was indeed a place where we were used to go and that has a lot of interest for us and important.
Այդ տարիներին մտքներովս անգամ չեր անցնում, որ պետք է դառնալ ռեստավրատոր ճարտարապետ։
And in those years, I was not even thinking about becoming a restorator architecture.
Բայց հետագայում, երբ որ արդեն մուտք գործեցի վերականգնման ճարտարապետության ասպարեզ, 2009 թվականին մեր ռեստավրատոր ճարտարապետներով հիմնեցինք վերականգնող ճարտարապետների հայկական ասոցիացիա։
But then when I entered in the field and I started to be an architect restorer, so in 2009 we created the Association of Armenian Architect Restorers.
Եվ 2015 թվականին Հայաստանի Հանրապետության մշակույթի նախարարության պատվերով ասոցիացիայի մի խումբ ճարտարապետների կողմից իրականացվենք Ավոտստարի բլրի եկեղեցու վերականգնման նախագիծը։
And in 2015, this group of architects restored was contacted by the Ministry of Culture to create the project for the restoration of the church that is on the hill in Avotstara.
Սակայն քանի որ համալիրը գիտենք շատ բավականին մեծ տարածք է զբաղեցնում, ունի բազմաթիվ խնդիրներ և պրոբլեմներ, մեր ծրագիրը սահմանափակվեց միայն այդ եկեղեցու նախագծով։
And as the complex is indeed huge and has lots of problems and it's very complex to be studied and the resources were scarce, so we concentrated only on the church.
Եվ մենք ճարտարապետներս երազում էինք, սպասում էինք մի հրաշքի, որ հերթը ինչ-որ առումով կհասնի նաև Ավոտստարի վանական համալիրին, որովհետև բոլորս գիտենք Հայաստանի տնտեսական, քաղաքական իրավիճակը։
And we architects, we hoped and we dreamed to have one day the possibility to enlarge our attention to the whole complex, because you know that in Armenia the resources are scarce and there are different problems and complexities, so this was our dream.
Եվ այսօր ի պատիվ Դավիթ Տոնոյանի մեր երազանքը այդ հրաշքը կարծես թե իրականություն է։
And today, thanks to David Tonoyan, who is supporting the whole process and also this summer camp, finally this miracle went through and our dream is becoming real.
Եվ ավելի ոգևորիչ եւ հուսադրող է նաեւ այն հանգամանքը, որ այսօր հավաքվել ենք մեր միջազգային տարբեր կազմակերպություններ ներկայացնող մեր գոլեգաների հետ։
And it's still more interesting and wonderful that we are here with this important group of international experts.
Եվ ես հույսով եմ, որ մենք միմյանցից սովորելու փոխադարձաբար շատ բաներ ունենք եւ պետք է աշխատենք համատեղ, որպեսզի կարողանանք բազում խնդիրներ, բազում գաղտնիքներ պարունակող Ավոտստարի վանքը դարձնենք ներկայացնենք։
And indeed, I'm looking forward to our collaboration and our mutual learning, peer learning one from each other, and to discover all the secrets of Avotstara Monastery.
Եվ վերջում շնորհակալություն եմ հայտնում նախ Դավիթ Տոնոյանին, իր ընկերներին, որոնք աջակցում են ծրագրին, եւ ներկա մեր գոլեգաներին կլինեն հնագետներ, ճարտարապետներ, պատմականներ այսօրվա համար, հասանիպան համար, որը ստարտ է հանդիսանում Հաղորդարի վերականգնման ընդհանուր ծրագրի։
So I'm indeed grateful not only to David Kanoyan but to all our colleagues and all the experts that join us this day to make this miracle come true. And thank you very much. And indeed, also thank you very much to you, Mr. Batishan, because we know how much you are busy, because there is a lot of work running in the Ministry of Education, Science, Culture and Sport, and you are one of the key people working in the field of monument preservation, so we are very honored and happy to have you with us in this workshop. And I think this is very important because the local experience is the most important, and as you well said, it's very important to have this exchange and to work together and to be together in the whole process. So we are very happy that you accepted to be part of this process, and we are also very happy to have all these young students, and also it's very interesting that you are coming from different backgrounds. So it will be very interesting also for us to speak on each other and to see the different mentalities and the different approach, and so I think this will be a very enriching experience. Thank you very much to all. Now we have some free time. At 2 o'clock a bus will leave to Hautstar. So we will again meet in front of the university, I think. Okay. Thank you.
Մենք գտնվում ենք Հաղորդարի հիմնական
We are finding ourselves in the very center of the fortified complex of Avutstar Monastery.
Մի արևելյան ճակատի դիմաց։
In front of the western facade of the church.
Հաղորդարի վանական համալիրի գլխավոր հուշարձանախումբը մասնավորապես կառուցված է մի քանի դարաշրջաններում եւ միմյանց վրա միմյանց գծված, որը առանձնահատուկ բարդություն է ստեղծում։
So there is a lot of complexity because this complex is built in several different times, and so there is a sort of layer of different constructions.
Ուրեմն հին եկեղեցին գտնվում է ավերակները, մնացորդները գտնվում են այս ինչ որ տեսնում ենք, այս կառույցի արևելյան կողմում, հետևի կողմում։
So in the eastern part of the building that we are seeing, there is there are the remains of the oldest church.
Որի հարավային կողմում պահպանվել են իմ կարծիքով տամբարան եկեղեցու մնացորդները։
And in the south of the oldest church, there are some remains, in his opinion, that were belonging to a cemetery.
Այդ երկու կառույցների արևմտյան կողմում 13-րդ դարում կառուցվել է գավիթը։
In front of the western part of those churches, there was a gavit, a sort of narthex that was built.
Որը մեր հայկական ճարտարապետության միջնադարյան դասական 4 սյունանի գավիթներից է։
Is a typical shape, has the typical shape of the Armenian classical gavit with 4 columns.
Ամբողջ համալիրը գառնի երկրաշարժի ժամանակ 17-րդ դարում վերածվել է փլատակների։
In the 17th century, the whole complex was destroyed by the earthquake.
Այնուհետև 18-րդ դարում Ասատուր համատանցի կաթողիկոսը որոշում է կառուցել նոր եկեղեցի։
In the 18th century, Hazatu Amatansi Catholicos decided to build a new church here.
Այս ինչ որ մենք տեսնում ենք համատանցու սկսած եկեղեցու արևմտյան ճակատն է։
So what we are seeing now here is the western facade of the church that was built by Amadansu.
Եվ ունենք հետևյալ պատկերը։ Եկեղեցու հարավային պատը, այս պատը անցնում է գավիթի մեջով։
The southern wall is going just inside of the remains of the gavit.
Որի համար գավիթի հյուսիսային կողմի երկու սյուները իրենց ամբողջ համակարգով տեղափոխված են դուրս, այնտեղ տեսնում ենք մենք
So this
սյուները եւ խորոյակները։
So this is why they took away the two of the columns of the Gavit that we can see here with their capital.
Այսինքն մենք ունենք նոր հիմնված եկեղեցի 18-րդ դարում, որը կառուցվել է Գավիթի հյուսիսային կեսի վրա։
So we have a church of the 18th century that is built exactly on a part of the northern part of the Gavit.
Սակայն քաղաքական պատճառներից ելնելով անավարտ է մնացել է եկեղեցին, ինչ որ տեսնում ենք այսքան է հասցրել։
So for political reasons, this church was not finished, and so it was built exactly until the level that is
Այդ ժամանակի վանքը չի կորել։
So the monastery was not used after that.
Կարիճների շրջապատում մենք ունենք քիչ կառույցներ։
So here all around we have some half constructions.
Որոնք բնակելի կառույցներ են,
Which are building for inhabitants,
տնտեսական
for
կառույցներ են,
economical constructions.
ցեղանատուն ունենք եւ այլն։
We have a refectory and other buildings.
Մեր ուսումնասիրությունների ժամանակ ակնառու կերպով մենք արձանագրել ենք
In the time of our history, they documented all the history of the place.
տարբեր ժամանակ եկեղեցու կամ այլ կառույցների քարերը մեկ ուրիշ կառույցի կառուցման ժամանակ։
So when they continue bringing
Սրա մեջ կիրառված
them from the oldest church.
իսկ երբ որ քարերը կրկնակի օգտագործման են ենթարկվում, այլակերպում են եւ դրանց նախնական պատկանելությունը ուղղակի ենթադրություն ալնում եւ դրանց տեղերը գտնելը
So when the stones are reused, also they are reworked. So it's very difficult to understand which was their original position and their original shaping.
Այս իմաստով մենք խնդրում ենք ամբողջը եղել, մաքրել, քարեր առանձնացնել, հասկանալ վերջնական կարգերը համալիրի։
So what we need is to do an archaeological excavation for the whole area, so to clean up, to understand and to find all the stones of the collapses and to study and understand to which building they are belonging.
Եվ կարծում եմ արդյունքում մտքի թռիչքով եւ պահպանելով պատմական շերտերը մենք կարող ենք ունենալ շատ հետաքրքիր մի միքս տարբերակ վերականգնել։
So we can have at the end a very interesting mix of preservation and restoration based on this information that we will collect.
Միտքս որոշակի բարձելու համար ասեմ, որ օրինակ կարող ենք այս անավարտ եկեղեցու մեջ տեղադրել Գավիթի նախնական սյուները, խոյակները, կամարները եւ պատի վրայով անցնենք եւ Գավիթը ամբողջացնենք։
So we can, for instance, imagine to take the columns from the Gavit that are now here, put them inside the church, and then build the Gavit over the church, and put all together and have some interesting solution.
Եվ հայտնաբերված նյութերը եթե դուրադրեն հետին եկեղեցու համարանի որոշակի չափով կամ ամբողջական վերականգնել, մենք կունենանք շատ արժանավայել աշխարհին ներկայանալի վերականգնման եւ ուսումնասիրման միքս տարբերակ.
If we can find all the stones of the oldest church, we can rebuild it completely, and then have some interesting interesting also worldwide interesting mix of conservation and reconstruction example.
Այս ամենի կողքին քիչ կառույցները Փարիզներով բավականին ավելի ակնառու են։ Երևացող են, որ ինչպիսին են եղել։
So, about the buildings all around and the walls in the center, it's more clear how they was.
Որը կարող ենք ամբողջական վերականգնել եւ ունենալ շրջափակող ամբողջական վերականգնած մի տարածք։
So in that case, it would be easy to rebuild them as they were.
Նույնիսկ կարելի է օգտագործել այդ տարածքները տարբեր նպատակներով։
So we can use all these parts and all this building with different aims.
Եվ կենտրոնում կունենանք այդ վերը նշված միքս տարբերակով վերականգնված կոնսերվացված համալիրը։
Yeah, in the middle we can have this very interesting mix of conservation and rebuilding, like example.
Եվ Փարիսներից դուրս կունենանք շարունակ բլուրի եկեղեցին, որը կվերականգնվի։
And then we will have as a continuation the church there on the hill that will be reconstructed.
Եվ մոտ 300 մետր հեռավորությամբ դեպի արևելք Սուրբ Կարապետ մատուռը, որը եւս շատ հեշտ եւ արագ կարելի է ամբողջական։
Yeah, 300 meters in that direction we have this madur, this chapel that can be restored very quickly.
Եվ առանձին համալիրի դուրս ունենք մեկ մեծ մասշտաբի խնդիր լուծելու, դա տարածքի բարետես վիճակի բերելն է, որի մեջ համար 1 գործոնը պետք է դառնա տարածքում պահպանված բոլոր խաչքարերի մոտավորված ամբողջական ցուցադրությունը, տեղադրությունը իրենց տեղերում եւ արժանավայել ցուցադրության դերերում։
And we can have a sort of exhibition of all the khachkars that can be found in this area outside of the walls, and can be very interesting to put them all together.
Մենք որտեղ որ իջանք հանդիպի մեքենայից, դրանից մի քիչ ներքև խաչքարերի խումբ ունենք, այդտեղից սկսած պետք է այդ բարեկարգման հետիոտն անցումներով, խաչքարերի տեղադրումով, կոտրած են հոյակերտ խաչքարի վերականգնումով մենք աստիճանաբար մոտենանք արդեն այս համալիրը։
So when we climbed with the car, we have seen some khachkars. There is indeed an interesting group of khachkars over there. We can collect them and organize them and have an exhibition of this khachkar in good order. Okay, thank you.
Ծրագրին մաղթում հաջողություն մեր
We wish all the success to this project.
Դավիթին իր շրջապատող ընկերներով ասեմ, հարազատներով ասեմ, քաջ առողջություն, որ մեր մեջքին կանգնած լինի եւ կարողանանք իրականացնել իր առաջադրած ծրագիրը։
We have a lot of help to everybody to continue for this program. So now can we invite Arsene to tell us something? You can also tell us something about the decoration.
Բական բան ասեմ։ Հավուստարի վանքը, որը գտնվում է շատ նշանավոր Գառնի եւ Գեղարդի շատ մոտ, մի տեսակ ճանապարհի ձորի այս ափին գտնվելով քիչ հայտնի է։
So this monastery, although it found itself in the very famous area of Garni and Gerhard, being on the other side of the river is less known.
Բայց Հավուստարի վանքը միջնադարյան Հայաստանի ամենանշանավոր վանքերից մեկն է եղել։
But in the times of the medieval Armenia, this was one of the most important monasteries and the most known.
Մասնավորապես 17-րդ դարում Երևանը գտնվել է Հավուստարի եպիսկոպոսության կազմի մեջ։
So Yerevan in the 17th century was under the control of the episcopos of Havustar.
Եվ վկայություններ կան այն մասին, որ երբ որ Հավուստարի առաջնորդ եպիսկոպոսը գնում էր Մայրաթուր Սուրբ Էջմիածին, եկեղեցու զանգերը տալիս էին եւ այդ պատիվը տրվում էր միայն Հավուստարի առաջնորդին։
So only to the bishop of Havustar there was the right to go to Echmiadzin. Only the bishop could ring the bells of Echmiadzin. Only the bishop of Havustar had this right.
Ուրեմն վանքի ծաղկման շրջանը 11-րդ դարն է, երբ որ այս վանքը հովանավորում էր ուրեմն Քեղի Բերթի կամ Կակավաբերթի ուրեմն տերը Գևորգ իշխանը եւ նա կառուցել է կաթողիկե եկեղեցին։
So the cathedral church was built in the 11th century by Georg,
Գևորգ իշխան։
by the Prince Georg.
Եվ այդ ժամանակ նա
So you see, this is Georg.
Այո, երևի։ Եվ նա Գագիկ Բագրատունի թագավորից նվեր է ստանում մի ուրեմն խաչ Քրիստոսի խաչելության պատկերով, որը կոչվում էր ամենափրկիչ եւ այդ խաչը դնում է այս վանքում։
So he received a cross stone with the representation of Jesus Christ crucified, and this was put there, and so the church was named Amenahperkic, Holy Savior, from this Khachkar.
Բարեբախտաբար այդ խաչը պահպանվել է եւ հիմա Սուրբ Էջմիածնում է գտնվում։
So this cross stone was preserved and now is in the Museum of Echmiadzin.
Եվ գիտեք, որ միջնադարում շատ կարևոր էր, որ մի նշանավոր սրբություն լիներ որևէ վանքում, որը դառնում էր այդ վանքի հեղինակության երաշխավորը։ Մի տեսակ հեղինակություն էր բերում այդ վանքին, եւ այդ խաչն է, որ հեղինակությունը բերել այս վանքին եւ վանքը կոչվել է ամենափրկիչ։
So from this cross that was so important, the name of the monastery came and it was named Amenahperkic from the name of the cross stone.
Ինչպես որ Գեղարդը այրի վանքն է եւ այդ Քրիստոսի Գեղարդի անունից նա կոչվում է նաեւ Գեղարդավանք, չէ՞։
So just as Gerhard, that is named out of the, I don't know in English the name.
Միզակ։
Here? Spear. And so here the name is from this crucifixion.
Okay. Ուրեմն 11-րդ դարից սկսած այս վանքի հեղինակությունը շատ բարձր էր եւ այստեղ կառուցվում են տարբեր եկեղեցիներ, ընդ որում տարբեր մարդկանց հովանավորությամբ։ Օրինակ Բլուրի վրա գտնվող եկեղեցին, որտեղ որ մենք կգնանք շուտով, այնտեղ արձանագրությունների մեջ հիշվում է, որ եկեղեցու կառուցմանը նվիրատվություն են արել տարբեր մարդիկ, ընդ որում մի քանի անուններ կան, որոնք երևանցի են։
Okay, so this, after the 11th century, when they started the construction, they built several buildings thanks to the donation of different people. And if we read the inscription in the church that is there on the hill, we see that there are many names of people that used to live in Yerevan in those times.
Հավուստարը շատ նշանավոր է նաև իր խաչքարերով։ Հրաշալի խաչքարեր կան այստեղ։ Հնագույնը, որը ուրեմն Պարիսպի հետևում է դրված 11-րդ դարի մի խաչքար է թվակիր, եւ այդ խաչքարերի բազմությունն էլ ցույց է տալիս, թե ինչքան նշանավոր սրբավայր է եղել, որովհետեւ խաչքարերը կանգնեցվում էին ինչ որ մարդկանց հոգու փրկության համար, որպես բարեխոսություն, եւ դա ցույց է տալիս, որ շատ ուրեմն մեծ ժողովրդականություն վայելող վանք է եղել։
So this place is also famous because there are many khachkars. Maybe the most important is behind there and is from the 11th century. And so the fact that we have here a lot of khachkar which are very precious demonstrate that there were a lot of people living around this monastery. And because the khachkar were created to remember some special event for some special people.
Եվ իհարկե ինչպես Հայաստանի մյուս նշանավոր վանքերը այստեղ ինչպես նաև Հավուստարում գրվել են ձեռագրեր, նկարազարդվել են ձեռագրեր, այսինքն ինքը եղել է նաև գրավոր մշակույթի կենտրոն։
So this was also a very important center for the creation of manuscripts.
Մի խոսքով այս վանքը այսպես այսօր մի տեսակ դուրս է մնացել տեսադաշտից շատերի, բայց իրականում եթե համապատասխան աշխատանքներ արվեն, նա կդառնա ուրեմն Հայաստանի ուրեմն այցելվող վայրերից մեկը, որպես տուրիստական կենտրոն, որպես հնագիտական վայր, արվեստի կենտրոն։
So this site has indeed a huge potential to become one of the most important and most interesting also touristic attractions here in Armenia.
Thank you.
Arsen took me pan.
Բարի գալուստ Հավուստարի վանական համալիր, իմ գործընկերները արդեն մանրամասն ներկայացրին վանքի արժեքը, դերը, կշիռը, առհասարակ միջնադարի, զարգացած եւ ուշ միջնադարի պատմության համատեքստում։
Okay, so welcome in Avustar. My colleagues already explained to you which is the weight and the quality and the characteristics of this monastery, very, very important monastery.
Ցանկացած միջնադարյան հուշարձան ուշագրավ է ոչ միայն իր ճարտարապետությամբ, քանդակային արվեստով, իր գրչության կենտրոն լինելուց բացի, նաև հայտնի է եւ հարուստ է իր որմերին պահպանված վիմական արձանագրություններով։
So every monastery, every building is not famous only for its architecture, but also for what we can find written on his walls.
Եվ շատ հաճախ այդ արձանագրություններն են, որ դառնում են տվյալ վանքի պատմության ուսումնասիրության համար միակ հավաստի սկզբնաղբյուրները։
Yeah, there are some times that these inscriptions are the only place where we can try
To study, for the study.
for the study and of the history of the monastery, where we can bring information about the history of the monastery.
Բարեբախտաբար Հավուստարից բազմաթիվ արձանագրություններ են մեզ հասել, հիմնականում շինարարական, նվիրատվական եւ հիշատակագրային բնույթի։
So we are very lucky that we have here a lot of inscriptions that are concerning the construction, some donations or some memories.
Եվ ամենահետաքրքիրը այն է, որ այդ արձանագրություններում դուք կարող եք գտնել նաև տեխնիկական առումով, մեթոդաբանական առումով հետաքրքիր երևույթներ, որպեսզի են կցագրությունը, համառոտագրությունը, փակագրությունը, որոնք բնորոշ են հենց վիմական արձանագրություններին։
So it's very interesting because not only you read what is written, but also you can learn from the way it is written, from the way the stone is worked, and some
ligatures, monogram, abbreviations. You can find this very interesting because a lot of inscription kept methods like these principles. Ես կցանկանայի մի քանի արձանագրությունների հետ կապված մանրամասներ ներկայացնել, հենց տեղում միասին մեկ-երկու արձանագրություն ուղղակի կարդայինք, որ ավելի տպավորիչ եւ ավելի հիմնավոր լինել։
Okay, so we will have now the chance to read with Professor Arutunian some inscriptions, so you can see the methodology and the characteristics that they have.
Մինչ այդ ասեմ, որ արձանագրությունների գիտական հրատարակությունը նախ եւ առաջ պատկանում է մեծավաստակ Գարեգին Հովսեփյանին, ով հրատարակել է Հավուստարի ամենափրկչին նվիրված մենագրությունը, որտեղ նաեւ արձանագրություններն են ընդգրկել։
Okay, Գարեգին Հովսեփյանը already have the book dedicated in the 1938 already published all the inscriptions of Avustar with the translation and the transliteration.
Երկրորդ ուսումնասիրությունը արդեն պարոն Կարեն Մաթևոսյանի մենագրությունն է, որտեղ նորից արձանագրությունների մասին խոսք կա։
And the second study is from Professor Karen Matevosyan that also studied all the inscriptions.
Մի քանի տարի առաջ հնագիտական պեղումներ իրականացվեցին Բլրի եկեղեցու տարածքում եւ նոր արձանագրություններ նաեւ հայտնաբերվեցին, որոնք հնագետ Արման Նալբանդյանը իր հոդվածում զետեղել է։
And a few years before, some archaeological excavations were realized all around the church there. So already in those times, they found some inscriptions, and Nalbandian, or the archaeologist Nalbandian, wrote a report about those.
Հիմա մոտենանք խոյակին, որը արձանագիր է, եւ փորձենք միասին կարդալ։
So we can go here and look at the capital and try to read all together.
At first, անգլերեն ներկայացնեմ, թե միասին։ Նախ եւ առաջ ցանկացած արձանագրություն վերցանելիս մենք նկարագրում ենք այդ արձանագրության տեղը, որտեղ այն գտնվում։
First of all, we have to note where the inscription is.
Տեղի նկարագրությանը հաջորդում է արձանագրության վիճակի նկարագրություն։ Ինչ վիճակում է գտնվում արձանագրությունը, քանի տողից է բաղկացած։
Although we should understand in which situation it is, how many rows is it.
Մենք տեսնում ենք, որ սկզբնային հատվածը արձանագրության վնասված է, բայց հիմա որ տեքստը ընդհանուր վերցանենք, կհասկանանք, որ հեշտ վերականգնելի է, քանի որ պահպանված տառերը թույլ են տալիս չպահպանված տառերը դյուրին վերականգնել։
So when we have some losses, we can read the whole of the inscription and try to guess what is missing. And in sometimes like this situation is quite easy to try to understand.
Իհարկե կան դեպքեր, որ հնարավոր չի լինում վերականգնել, պարզապես նման դեպքում մենք հատուկ նշաններ ենք դնում, թե գծեր կամ բազմակետեր եւ վերականգնում ենք միայն այն, ինչը հնարավոր է։
But there are other situations in which it's very difficult to understand and we can lose some parts.
Վերցանության ժամանակ մենք կհասկանանք նաև թե այս արձանագրությունը արձանագրությունը բնույթով ինչ տեսակ է, շինարարության մասին է վկայում, նվիրատվություն է, թե պարզապես ինչ որ այցելու ուխտավոր եկել եւ հիշատակագրություն է թողել։
So when we read it, we understand if it is written to explain something about the construction, or if it is some memory of or some donation, speaking about some donation.
Բարեբախտաբար արձանագրությունը մաքուր է, լավ է պահպանված, այսինքն այստեղ մենք մաքրելու, տառերի փոսորակները հողից հեռացնելու կամ այլ մնացորդներից մաքրելու որևէ խնդիր չունենք։
In this case, we are very lucky because it's clean and it's possible to read it easily.
Եվ այսպես, առաջին բառը բնականաբար տեսնում ենք ինչ որ տառա մնացորդ է, որը առաջին հայացքից հուշում է, որ պիտի ս լինի։ Քանի որ I դեպքում փոքր ստեղ պիտի ունենար, որին հաջորդում է դարձյալ S-ի նման մեկ այլ տառ, որից հետո արդեն հստակ կարդացում է Խ, I, Თ, A-ը։ Խիթարը արդեն հուշում է, որ այստեղ մտառն է, մխիթար։ Դիմացի S-ն, թվացյալ S-ն հաստատվում է, որ արդեն S է, որովհետև վիմական արձանագրությունները ունեն իրենց կանոնավոր սկսվածքը։ Ես, մխիթար, I, մխիթար, the servant of this monastery, etc. Ուրեմն այստեղ ունենք I, yes, մխիթար, the name of donator, հիմա տեսնենք թե ինչ է տվել, հաջորդում է սպասավոր բառը, այստեղ ուզում եմ ուշադրություն դարձնեք այս հատվածին, սպասավոր, այսինքն A և V-ուն տառերը միասին են, V և R տառերը միասին են։
So you can see here that there are some letters that are a mix of different letters, one over the other.
Սրանք արդեն կոչվում են կցագրեր,
We call them կծակրեր for
ligatures, ligatures, այսինքն կցագրություն է, որը բնորոշ է հատկապես վիմագրերին, ձեռագրերում էլ է հանդիպում, բայց շատ սակավ է ձեռագրերում։
We can find this also in the manuscript, but it's very rare on the walls. It's very typical of the inscription on the.
Ուրեմն մենք հասկացանք, որ մխիթարը սպասավոր է, այսինքն servant-ն է, այսինքն վահավուստարի կամ մեկ այլ համալիրի սպասավորն է, որը ինչ որ տեսնենք ինչ է արել, ինչ է տվել վանքին։ Ուրեմն ես մխիթար, սպասավոր, մխիթարը սպասավոր, հետո հաջորդում է տեր վրթանիսի, տերը, որը համարվում է համառոտագրություն, տեր բառն է, այսինքն father, տեր վրթանիսի, այսինքն իրար հետ են սրանք, ետու տվել են, ինչ են տվել, տեսեք ծտարը վրան գրված է հորիզոնական գիծ և երկու կողմերից կետեր կան, սա վկայում է, որ այս ծտարը մենք պիտի կարդանք ոչ թե տար, այլ թիվ։
So when you see this line over a letter, we should understand that this should be read not as a letter, but as a number.
Իսկ 50-ն է։ Մեր այբուբենի տառերը ունեն նաև իրենց թվային արժեք, հետևաբար
all the letters of the alphabet have also a significant, every letter corresponds to one number.
Ուրեմն տվել է 50 դահեկան։ Դահեկանը առհասարակ ընդունված է համարել ոսկե դրամը, սպիտակը արծաթե դրամը, թեև աղբյուրներում տարբեր ժամանակների համար մի քիչ տարբեր տեղեկություններ են վկայված, երբեմն դահեկանը եւս համարում են արծաթե դրամի տարբերակ։ Այսինքն դրամական նվիրատվություն է արել, անկախ ամեն ինչից դրամական նվիրատվություն է արել, 50 դահեկան է նվիրաբերել, տվեցի ասում է 50 դահեկան եւ 50 դահեկան ի տունս, տուն ասելով նկատի ունի վանքը բնականաբար։
When they speak about home, they are speaking about the monastery.
Սա շատ ընդունված տարբերակ է եւ այլ վանքերից էլ ունենք, որ տուն ասելով նկատի ունեն հենց վանքը։ Որից հետո հաջորդում է եւ ետուն, սովորաբար այսպես էր կարգը, նվիրատվության դիմաց փոխհատուցում էր միաբանություն։ Ինչով է փոխհատուցում։ Պատարակների ժամանակ նրանց in return for which դրա դիմաց ինչ են անում։ Պատարակներում պիտի այս մարդուն հիշատակեն։ Եվ ետուն ասում է ինձ։ Ատարը տեսեք էլի վրան հորիզոնական գիծ, abbreviation A կետերով, այսինքն այս ան պիտի կարդանք թիվ 1, ուրեմն ինչ են տվել 1 օր ժամ, ժամը դա պատարակն է,
So the inscription tells us that whenever we have a letter which does not, which has a line above it, a dash, and is covered with two dots from both sides, we read it not as a letter, but with its numerical value according to the alphabet. So here we have a donation of 50 silver coins or golden. It's a bit difficult because depending on the century, it was fluctuating. And so the person donated 50 silvers to the house, in literal translation, which means not the house, but the church, the monastic complex as it is. And here we have and usually when people were doing a donation, they were expecting a favor from the monastery in form of a prayer for their livelihood and things like that. So here they were expected to have one day of prayer or a liturgy devoted for them. No, or
Մեկ օր պատարակ, այսինքն մեկ օր պատարակին, տարվա ընթացքում մեկ օր պիտի իրեն պատարակի ժամանակ հիշատակեն.
They need to remember his donation and devote the liturgy.
Sometimes you can find the name of holiday, but in this inscription without the names of holiday, only wrote during the year. Ամբողջացնենք արձանագրությունը, տեսնենք ինչ պատկեր է։ Ուրեմն ես մխիթար, այ մխիթար, the servant of father Վրթանիս, ինքը սպասավորն է Տեր Վրթանեսի։ Նվիրատուն փաստացի ուրեմն մխիթարն է։ Այո։
When we say a servant, it doesn't mean a person who is serving in the monastery, but the person who is serving the God in that.
Այո, սպասավոր Տեր Վրթանիսի, Yetu, I donated 50 dahekan to the monastery, որտեղ տունը հենց վանքն է, որի դիմաց in return for which you received one day liturgy. Per year. Յուրաքանչյուր տարի. Այսինքն նվիրատվական. So this donative inscription. If you noticed, we haven't correct date, but according to paleographic features, we can date this inscription about approximately 13th, 14th centuries. 13-14-րդ դարերով։ Կարելի է թվագրել ըստ տարաձևերի հնագրական առանձնահատկությունների։
Համաչելել չկարեմ։ Չէ, ինչ ասում եք, կարայր գրեի։
Հա, ամեն ինչ արձանագրվել է։ Ավելի շատ հարուստ է վիմագրերով Բլրի եկեղեցին, հիմա կարծում եմ գնանք Բլրի եկեղեցի, հա, այնտեղ հա, քանի եղանակն էլ բանա լինում։
Andiamo là a vedere un'altra.
Չեն 700-ն է, խն 40-ն է, բեն 2-ն, այսինքն 742-ին պիտի գումարենք 551, քանի որ հայոց մեծ թվականի համար որպես մեկ թիվ է հանդիսացել 552-ը։ 552-ից է հայոց տոմարը ընդունվել։ Հետևաբար փրկչական 1-ից 551 տարիները եղածի վրա գումարվում են, որ այսօրվան համարժեք թվականը ստանան։ Ես մոռացա։
So here we can see that before starting the inscription, they have drawn the lines, which is a hint for us to identify the technique which it was done with. Because as you can see, for the ones in upper and the ones below do not have those lines. At the end of the inscription we see the letters Ch, B, which are translated as 142 in their numerical value, and we add 551 to that number because the Armenian calendar started in the first year of Armenian calendar was 552 after the Christ. So when translating this into the Gregorian calendar, we add to 551.
Արձանագրությունը բնույթով նվիրատվական է։
So this one is also a donatory inscription.
Եկեղեցին վիմագրում հիշատակվում է Սուրբ Ամենափրկիչ անունով։
The church in this epigraphy is depicted as Holy Savior.
Որովհետև կապված էր այդ հայտնի ամենափրկիչ խաչափայտի հետ, որն այսօր ցուցադրվում է Էջմիածնի ավանդատուն թանգարանում։
And as we already discussed, the name is connected to the famous crucifixion cross, which is in Holy See's museum.
Նվիրատուներից մեկի անունը նույնիսկ Շաքար է։ Շատ հետաքրքիր անձնանուն կնոջ անունն է Գորգը եւ Շաքարը միաբանել են անդամագրվել են վանքին եւ նվիրատվություն են արել։
So the name of one of the donatory people is Shakar, which is in Armenian translation for sugar. And the other name is also interesting. It's
Yes.
a rug. So the rug
Yes.
and the sugar.
Միշտադարյան վիմագրերում հաճախ կգտնեք նաև կենթանական ծագման անուններ, որոնք բավական շատ են, ինչպես արջուկ, մուկ, գայլ, գալձակ, Փիսիկ մինչև անգամ վիմագրերը նաև այդ առումով են բավական հետաքրքիր։
And we can find very interesting names in the inscriptions connected with animals, particularly the small animals like a small bear, a kitten,
Գայլ,
a cub,
etc.
and etc.
Շրջակա տարածքը գերեզմանոց է, որտեղ կարող եք գտնել նաև արձանագիր տապանակարեր միաբանների անուններով։
And here on the outside of the church we can see the epitaphs of around the church, which is also a cemetery in a sense.
Հաճախ տապանակարերին կտեսնեք այսպես ֆիգուրային պատկերներ, մարդու գրաֆիկ պատկերներ են, որոնք հենց հատուկ են 13-14-րդ դարերին։
And also we can see the circular engravings on the stone are the representation of a person on a tombstone.